Hi, you probably have a lot of logs that you're collecting in your environments, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to make sense out of it because not everybody is trained to understand on how to analyze certain log patterns. So to make your logs and your investment in logs more actionable, I've created a dashboard for you that I want to share with you. Let me switch over to my Playground tenant. So this is a dashboard that you can explore yourself. Just click on the link on the video on the Playground tenant based on the data we have there. But as with everything on the Playground tenant, you can just download this particular dashboard and then import it in your own Dynatrace environment. Now, let me explain to you what we've built here. As I said, we know that when you are analyzing logs or when you're ingesting logs, you want to understand what do these logs actually tell me? Is there anything in there that I need to take action on? So one of the things I've done is, let's start with this chart on the bottom. It gives you a quick overview of how many logs are coming in, how many of them are info, warning, errors, or even none, which is a bad practice. So not a good practice, but a bad practice of having logs that don't have a status. In this case, in my environment, it seems I'm following bad practices. I have a lot of logs with none. What else do we have here? We see a lot of these non-log status logs, but that actually have error in their content. So these are actually logs that we should pay some attention to. So I'm highlighting here that 65 of my logs actually include error as a text in the content, but they're marked as none with no status. What else do we have? I have 3 logs that have exceptions. That means in the text, somewhere the word exception happens, which means this is typically something we want to focus on. What else? These 2 numbers here are very interesting. We have been talking about connecting logs with traces or logs in context of traces. So if you are not only ingesting logs, but also instrument your applications, your services with either the one agent or with OpenTelemetry, then you can connect these 2 data sources. Now, what I'm highlighting here is how many of the logs that I'm ingesting are actually connected to logs. It seems I have 4,000, but I have 80,000 logs that are not connected to a trace. So some of them may be startup logs, some of them may be from systems where you don't have distributed traces, but I'm pretty sure you have a good understanding of how many of your logs should actually be connected. And so that's a good ratio and indicator. Also, I'm highlighting here the top log message. I have 1,661 instances of the same log message in the last 2 hours. Also, top log sources. Where do most of my logs actually come in from? So this gives me a quick overview to see, do I have bad practice in terms of not specifying any status, like none? Do I have logs that have none as a status, but they actually contain errors? Do I have logs with exception? And what's the ratio between logs with trace context and without trace context? What's my top log message and where do most of my logs come from? So this gives me a quick overview and it's immediately actionable. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, I'm trying to make it even more actionable. Top logs. Here I show you what are the top 20 log messages overall, right? Besides that 1,645, I also have a lot of others that are constantly repeating. I also, on the right here, I have the top 20 log messages based on the selected status. The selected status here refers to that filter. I will explain the filter in a little bit in more detail, but this immediately shows me that there are some errors here. Now, next table is top 20 log messages for the selected status, so all the error logs, but that also are connected with a trace. So it seems we have some error messages here, error while saving changes and error code while saving the entity changes, and I have a trace. Same here, some credit card validation. Now, if we have a trace ID in Dynatrace connected to a log and we show it in a table like this, I can click on it and I can say open record with, which means I now get presented, for instance, with the distributed tracing app. I can now open this log in context of the distributed trace. And now I get to see the full end-to-end trace where this log was created, giving me more context to understand why did this log why was it created? Why is there an error? What was the request that came initially in? So this is really cool. Now let me quickly go back to finish the explanation of my dashboard. What else do I have? I thought it would be really useful to see just like what are the most recent logs, because you want to see like what's happening, like what's coming in right now. Also scrolling down a little bit further is I have 2 tables. These are the last ones. logs with errors and exceptions. So the first one, again, those logs that have none as a status, but somewhere in the content they have error. Also, the last one, logs with exceptions. So these are log messages where in the content the word exception is included. So I thought these are good to highlight. So this is how this dashboard works, and I wanted to make sure it's easy actionable. Now, to make it even more actionable, by default, if you don't specify anything, it shows you really all of your logs. But you can see here some filters, or we call them variables in Dynatrace. So I can filter on only analyze logs in certain buckets. So in Dynatrace, we store logs in buckets. You can also, for those of you that are working on Kubernetes, you could say, hey, you know what? I'm not interested in everything in Kubernetes. I'm interested in easy trade and maybe in some of these that I might be responsible for. So you can just select specific namespaces. As you're changing the namespaces, you can see the dashboard automatically updates. It's analyzing all the logs that come in through here. Now, I understand that not everybody is on Kubernetes. So I can select, let's say, everything, or actually I can go to non-Kubernetes. But what I can do here is log source. So for instance, if you know you have written a certain log file, when Dynatrace ingests these logs, we attach the log source to every log. I can obviously see the top log sources here, and I can already see some syslogs, some messages, IPAMP. There's also some easy travel. So maybe easy travel is one of the apps and the logs that I'm interested in. So I'm typing in easy travel. Now, again, the dashboard automatically analyzes, do I have any logs that have none as a status, but with errors? Fortunately not. Actually, it should be green and not red here. I may want to fix this. I have logs with trace context, and I have some without trace context. I get a nice overview. And as I said, if you scroll down, all of these particular tables will automatically update. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Last thing I want to show you here, if I go back to log source, you can specify sampling rate, right? DQL, that's the stuff behind the scenes, is querying your logs, but you can also specify your sampling rate. You want to see everything. Sometimes it's just good enough to use some sampling. You can also specify the error status. So this is some of the tables, remember, are using this. And then content is also really great. So I can, for instance, say, I think there's a certain log message and I want to understand where this log message comes from, or where is it. So for instance, one of my applications is doing credit card transactions. I think something with credit. So I can search for that. Now Dynatrace tells me exactly what are the top log messages that are coming in that contain credit. Where do they come from? Or they all come from the container output. I immediately see that those actually, one of those has a non as a status. So I can then scroll down. I can see all of these here, right? These are all matching my particular filter on the top. And the nice thing again here is I have this log that says, sorry, we can't process your credit cards or mere credit cards. I have a trace, one click, open record with distributed trace. I am in the trace of that particular distributed trace that contains this particular log message. So going back once more, as I said, you can use this dashboard as is, download it, import it on your own Dynatrace tenant. Once you have downloaded it and imported it into your own tenant, one of the things you can do, and this is what I like because I get some of my inspiration from other people that have built dashboards before, you can always go in then and then click on the edit button. The edit button will then give you the DQL query behind the scenes. So this is also a way for you to learn how I built this dashboard. And by the way, as I said, kudos to Thomas and Mike, Thomas Brandl and Mike Ferguson, that is, because I borrowed some of their stuff that they've built and then just enhanced it a little bit. But some really good ways. You can see here how the query is then adhering to the values or the variables on top, like the sampling ratio, filter with the buckets, filter with the namespaces, the content, and so on. So you can click on any of those and just see the DQL query behind the scenes. Also, some of you may wonder, how does he do the coloring? This is all on the visual side. I use a lot of single value tiles here, and on the single value tile, you can then specify the threshold and say what color should be used if the value exceeds a certain value or not, right? So there's a lot of cool things here that you can do and learn. Maybe last thing on the variables. This is also really nice. Check out all variables, how they are specified. As you may or may not know, variables can have different data sources. So for instance, on the buckets, if I click on it, this is populated with the result of yet another DQL query. So give me all the buckets in Dynatrace that actually store logs. Or maybe do another one, the namespaces. Give me all of the Kubernetes namespaces that we have. Again, this is based on live monitoring. What else do we have here? Sampling. I think this one is actually a CSV, so a static list. Also great. You can also do things with dashboard, with variables, like showing them or not showing them. You can hide them. You can have one variable reference another one. So when you select one value, it updates the next one, and so on and so forth. So really powerful. Now, I do hope that you find this useful. I would like to ask you for a favor now, though. If you see this and you say, hey, Andy, it's a good start, but there are other patterns out there besides the logs with non-status, logs with exceptions, let me know. Send me an email, put a comment on the video, or just if you have feedback, there's also our email address, defrel@dynatrace.com. Feel free to drop us a mail about, hey, was this useful, yes or no? What are other patterns that are out there? Because my goal and our goal is to find these patterns and then make it easier for everyone to analyze these patterns without having to be an expert on Dynatrace. All right. And with this, I wanted to say thank you. Hopefully this was useful. Hopefully you can see how you can make your logs that you already have more actionable. See you next time.